Caffeine, coffee, and tea. How do they impact eye pressure? Caffeine is one of the most widely consumed substances worldwide, found in coffee, tea, energy drinks, and many soft drinks. Eye care patients often wonder if their morning coffee or tea could raise their intraocular pressure, IOP, or affect ocular blood flow. In general, a moderate dose of caffeine, roughly the amount in 1 or 2 cups of coffee, 150 to 200 milligrams, causes a small, temporary rise in IOP that peaks within about an hour of ingestion. In healthy eyes, this increase is usually only 1 mmHg and is clinically negligible. However, in glaucoma patients and ocular hypertension cases, similar doses can raise IOP by 3 to 4 millimeters above baseline. Caffeine also slightly raises systemic blood pressure, so calculated ocular perfusion pressure often increases by 1 to 2 mmHg after coffee. Paradoxically, despite higher OPP, caffeine's vasoconstrictive effects tend to decrease small vessel blood flow in the eye. Below, we review the acute and chronic effects of caffeine on IOP and ocular perfusion, contrast coffee with tea, especially green tea catechins, and give practical advice for patients with high eye pressure. Acute effects of caffeine on IOP and ocular perfusion. After drinking coffee or another caffeinated drink, caffeine is rapidly absorbed, reaching peak blood levels in about 1 to 1.5 hours. At doses of roughly 150 to 200 milligrams, about 1 strong 8-ounce cup of coffee, studies show a modest IOP rise. For example, a randomized trial found that drinking 182 milligrams of caffeine in coffee produced an average IOP increase of only 1 milligrams at 60 to 90 minutes versus decaffeinated coffee. In most people, this change is statistically significant but trivial clinically. By contrast, a crossover study of glaucoma and ocular hypertension patients reported that the same 180 milligrams dose raised IOP by about 3 to 4 mmHg at 60 minutes, whereas decaffeinated coffee, just 3.6 milligrams caffeine, caused almost no rise. Thus, healthy individuals typically see 1 millimeter rise, while glaucoma suspects or patients can experience larger spikes after a normal cup of coffee. These caffeine-induced elevations generally begin within 30 to 60 minutes and tend to subside over a few hours as the caffeine is metabolized, half-life 3 to 7 hours. Along with IOP, caffeine also slightly elevates ocular perfusion pressure, OPP, because it raises blood pressure. In one study, 182 milligrams of caffeine increased calculated OPP by 1.5 mmHg at 60 min compared to decaf. In other words, eye driving pressure goes up slightly. However, multiple experiments show caffeine's net effect is vascular constriction in the eye. A classic study observed a 13% drop in macular blood flow 1 hour after 200 milligrams of caffeine. Newer imaging confirms that even 100-200 milligrams doses cause meaningful reductions in ocular microcirculation. For example, optical-coherence angiography, OCT-A, scans after coffee show significantly narrowed retinal vessels and lower capillary blood flow, despite any OPP increase. One recent trial with 72 milligrams caffeine, a moderate coffee, found retinal capillary perfusion decreased by 2 hours, while larger vessel retina choroid flow actually rose. Taken together, caffeine briefly raises driving pressure in the eye but constricts the ocular microvasculature, leading to reduced tissue perfusion. In summary, acute caffeine intake, e.g. 1 coffee, typically causes a small transient IOP rise on the order of 1 to 3 mmHg with peak effect 1 hour post-drink and a slight increase in OPP. But it also stimulates ocular vasoconstriction, the net result being reduced retinal and choroidal blood flow. For most healthy people, these changes are of little practical consequence. Chronic caffeine consumption and tolerance. Long-term or habitual caffeine use generally does not continue to elevate IOP in most people. Large population studies have found no consistent link between usual coffee consumption and higher eye pressure. A UK biobank analysis of over 120,000 participants showed that people drinking 2 cups of caffeine per day actually had a slightly lower IOP on average than those with minimal intake. In that study, habitual caffeine intake by itself was weakly associated with lower IOP, so 0.1 mmHg lower for highest versus lowest intake, and no overall increase in glaucoma risk. However, genetics mattered. In individuals with a high innate risk of elevated IOP, very high caffeine intake, 300 milligrams per day, was linked to a 3.9-fold higher glaucoma prevalence. In other words, most people seem to develop some tolerance to caffeine's IOP effects over time, but genetically susceptible individuals may still experience harm when consuming large amounts. Some small studies suggest that chronic high caffeine consumers show blunted IOP responses, tolerance, but this area is still under investigation. The take-home is that steady daily coffee use does not appear to raise baseline IOP in the general population, and many glaucoma patients drink caffeine without obvious pressure hikes. Nevertheless, experts caution that those who are genetically predisposed or have borderline controlled glaucoma should still be wary. Large acute doses may still cause spikes, and any extra pressure could matter when disease is advanced. As one crossover trial concluded, daily intake of 180 milligrams caffeine may not be recommended for patients with ocular hypertension or normal tension glaucoma. Coffee versus tea, caffeine and catechins. Caffeine content. A typical 8-oz 240 milliliter cup of brewed coffee contains roughly 80 to 150 milligrams of caffeine, depending on strength and bean. By contrast, an equivalent cup of black tea has about 30 to 50 milligrams, and green tea even less, around 20 to 40 milligrams. Decaffeinated coffee typically contains only 3 to 5 milligrams per cup, effectively eliminating most of caffeine's effects on the eye. Tea's other benefits. Beyond its lower caffeine dose, tea, especially green tea, is rich in polyphenols, catechins that have potent antioxidant and anti-inflammatory actions. The main catechin in green tea, epigallocatechin gallate, EGCG, is known to scavenge free radicals and modulate cellular stress pathways. Eye research suggests EGCG and related compounds may protect retinal cells and the optic nerve independent of IOP. For example, EGCG has been shown in lab and animal studies to reduce oxidative damage in retinal ganglion cells, the neurons lost in glaucoma, and support ocular surface health. Reviews note that EGCG has emerged as a promising candidate against many eye diseases, including age-related macular degeneration, AMD, diabetic retinopathy, and glaucoma, and its anti-high inflammatory effects may improve overall eye health. In essence, green tea's catechins offer antioxidant benefits that coffee lacks, potentially protecting the lens and retina from oxidative stress, which is implicated in conditions like cataracts and AMD. Coffee versus tea and IOP. Studies comparing beverages find that coffee, with its higher caffeine, shows the clearest link to eye pressure and glaucoma. A population survey in Korea found that regular coffee drinkers had a higher prevalence of open-angle glaucoma, while tea drinkers did not. B population, coffee was associated with 2.4 times increased odds of glaucoma, whereas tea or soft drinks showed no significant effect. This aligns with clinical data. Coffee's high caffeine dose triggers IOP rises more reliably than tea. Black or green tea, in smaller caffeinated doses, cause far smaller IOP blips, if any. And the catechins in green tea may even counteract minor blood flow changes via antioxidant vessel support. In practical terms, substituting decaffeinated coffee or consuming tea instead of coffee is a simple way to minimize any IOP impact while still reaping potential health benefits. For example, someone who needs to limit caffeine can switch to decaf brew or herbal tea blends. Green tea, regular or decaf, provides a soothing cup with only a fraction of the caffeine and the bonus of ocular antioxidants. People differ. Genetics, metabolism, and tolerance. Not everyone responds to caffeine the same. Genetic factors and individual metabolism cause wide variability in caffeine's effects. Caffeine's half-life, time for blood level to halve, is typically 3 to 7 hours in adults, but can be much shorter or longer depending on age, liver function, pregnancy, smoking status, and certain medications. For example, cigarette smoking induces CYP1A2 enzymes, speeding caffeine clearance, whereas some medications or pregnancy slow it down. Variants of the CYP1A2 gene can make one person a fast metabolizer, less effect, and another a slow metabolizer, prolonged effect. Similarly, variations in adenosine receptor genes can influence how strongly caffeine affects blood vessels and the eye. In broad terms, a slow metabolizer or caffeine-sensitive person may experience longer or larger IOP spikes after drinking. For the eye specifically, studies have identified genetic predispositions that modify caffeine's impact. The large UK Biobank study found that people with high polygenic risk scores for elevated IOP glaucoma had greater pressure increases and glaucoma risk from heavy caffeine intake. Likewise, eye care reviews advise that individuals genetically predisposed to glaucoma should use caffeine conservatively, for instance, keeping under 180 milligrams per day, due to possible clinically significant IOP elevations. In practice, if a patient notices that their eye pressure monitors spike after any coffee, they may be particularly sensitive and should discuss it with their doctor. Decaffeinated and low caffeine options. For those who enjoy the taste of coffee or tea but want to avoid caffeine's effects, decaffeinated beverages are a good option. Decaf coffee contains only a few milligrams of caffeine per cup, roughly 5 to 10 times less than regular coffee. Clinical data show that decaffeinated coffee produces almost no rise in IOP. In the glaucoma study mentioned above, decaf, 3.6 milligrams caffeine, caused IOP changes of under 1 mmHg, statistically negligible at 30 to 90 minutes. Similarly, herbal teas, e.g. chamomile or rooibos, are naturally caffeine-free. Thus, switching to decaf coffee or tea can eliminate caffeine as a variable. In summary, patients with high IOP or glaucoma have ready alternatives. Decaf coffee or green tea, regular or decaf, satisfy the craving for a warm drink while practically eliminating IOP concerns. Implications for high IOP and glaucoma patients. For people with poorly controlled IOP or glaucoma, it is prudent to be mindful of caffeine intake. Any transient pressure spikes could, in theory, add to optic nerve stress over time. Most experts do not require complete caffeine abstinence, but they often advise moderation and caution around critical testing times. For instance, the 2011 crossover study concluded that caffeinated drinks below 180 milligrams are not recommended for ocular hypertension or normal tension glaucoma patients. The recent review notes that clinically significant IOP elevations from caffeine are possible in genetically predisposed individuals, so these patients in particular should limit large doses. On the other hand, caffeine has not been shown to accelerate disease in most cases. The same comprehensive ophthalmology review found that transient IOP jumps after coffee are not likely to impact glaucoma progression in most patients. Thus, occasional moderate caffeine use, e.g. 1 regular coffee per day, is usually safe for well-managed glaucoma. The key is awareness. If you know caffeine raises your eye pressure by a few points, you can plan around it. Practical tips: timing and home monitoring. Before clinic visits, to get the most accurate IOP measurement, schedule it before your first cup of caffeine. Because caffeine peaks about 1 hour post-ingestion, abstain from coffee or caffeinated tea for at least 2 to 3 hours before an eye exam. If you arrived on empty without caffeine, your IOP reading reflects your baseline. If you drink coffee first, your IOP might be temporarily higher and could confuse the evaluation. Many clinics instruct patients to avoid coffee-tea before applanation for this reason. Of course, paperwork in medical visits has improved, and now many electronic records allow you to note last caffeine intake. But the simplest solution is measure IOP in the clinic before you caffeinate. Home monitoring. If you check your eye pressure at home, aim for consistency. Try to measure at the same time each day, e.g. first thing in the morning. Always note when you last had caffeine. For example, one might measure right after waking up before any coffee to see the true baseline pressure. If you notice unusual spikes, check if they follow heavier than usual caffeine consumption. If your routine includes coffee, consider trying a decaf or herbal alternative on testing days. Patients can discuss with their ophthalmologist whether to avoid caffeine entirely on a test day or simply to record their usual habits. General advice. Patients often ask whether they must give up coffee for visual health. The consensus is that moderate caffeine use is acceptable for most, but those struggling to control IOP should exercise stricter control. Tips include switching to decaf coffee or green tea, spacing out doses, don't spike caffeine right before surgery or injections, and of course, adhering to glaucoma medications diligently. If you do drink caffeinated beverages, do so well away from your eye drop schedule and pressure checks. Conclusion. In conclusion, caffeine's effect on eye pressure is real but usually mild and short-lived. A normal cup of coffee may raise IOP by about 1 mmHg in healthy people, with a peak around 1 hour, and then return to baseline. Coffee's higher caffeine content makes its impact larger than that of tea. Green tea, while caffeinated, contains catechins, powerful antioxidants that can support eye health independent of IOP. For glaucoma patients or anyone with high eye pressure, it's wise to limit large doses of caffeine, especially around measurement times. Switching to decaffeinated drinks effectively eliminates this concern. Finally, individual differences mean responses vary. Genetic factors can make some people especially sensitive to caffeine's effects. By timing caffeine consumption thoughtfully, e.g., measuring pressure before coffee and considering decaf or tea alternatives, patients can enjoy their brews while keeping accurate track of their ocular health. All links to sources are available in the text version of this article. You can find the full article at visualfieldtest.com. Thanks for listening. To check your visual field, click the link at the bottom of this article or visit visualfieldtest.com.